We have 7 players here that you could buy to increase your chances of making the fantasy playoffs or even winning your league, and we're going to draft them based on the order that we would prefer them, and because I talk first, I get first pick. I'm going to pick my first player here. My biggest buy right now in fantasy football this week is David Montgomery. And do you know why it's David Montgomery? Because right now, everybody is riding the Jahmyr Gibbs hype train.
Everyone is victory lapping us, dogging on us in the comments. You guys are out on Jahmyr Gibbs too early. Oh my gosh, dude.
So let's look.
Did we forget?
David Montgomery was the goal line and red zone back there. As soon as he went out, Jahmyr Gibbs had weeks as the running back 3 and the running back 1. 27.6 points and 29.9 points. Admittedly, very good. Targets, 10 targets, 5 targets. Love it. He had a touchdown in each of those games. That's not going to happen when David Montgomery comes back. Sorry.
And it sucks.
It's not going to.
Gibbs is literally so much fun to watch. Everyone that loved Swift when he was on the Lions, Jahmyr Gibbs is even he's so much more fun to watch than DeAndre Swift ever was. I wish we could get this every single week.
Ready for this? Ready for this statistic?
Yep.
And I've got people telling me that we're crazy for selling Gibbs. David Montgomery is 5th in red zone carries. Total in the entire league. And he's played 4.5 games.
Oh my gosh.
5th. He is 26. Josh Jacobs has 28. Kenneth Walker has 30. Tony Pollard has 31. Christian McCaffrey has 36. Those guys have played more games. David Montgomery is still 5th. When he comes back, and he is 1.5 touchdowns over expected, it doesn't matter. When he comes back, Jahmyr Gibbs will not get red zone work. They had no red zone packages for him before. Why would they change that? Why would the Lions? And this is so interesting to me because we've seen this. We saw this with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift. They're not changing, guys. So because of that, people are going to be lower on David Montgomery. People are saying eventually they just have to give up and switch to the better back. No, they don't.
They paid him 3 years.
They won't do that.
3 years for $30 million.
Not only that, and they do have a potential out after next year, which I think is interesting. But not only that. No, it's after 2024.
Yeah, so after being on the deal for 2 years.
2 years. Yeah. Not only that. It's not only the contract and what they paid him. It's the fact that, again, we have seen this play out. They're going to give him the ball inside the 20. So if Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't have a breakaway play or if he doesn't get 6 or more targets, it's less about Jahmyr Gibbs and it's more about David Montgomery.
Yeah, and this is something that we saw with DeAndre Swift. Just because DeAndre Swift was massively hurt by Jamal Williams' production in fantasy, it didn't mean that DeAndre Swift wasn't ever going to have really good games because he was just that good. Jahmyr Gibbs is just that good where he's going to have games where he explodes. They just only allow him to do that when they're forced to. The Lions and Ben Johnson. This is just a guy where for the rest of the season, when I'm looking for a running back to rely upon down the stretch to put up a big game when I'm in the playoffs, am I really counting on Jahmyr Gibbs once David Montgomery's back?
Maybe, but should you count on David Montgomery? Yes.
Yeah.
When he's played, he's got 17 points per game. In one of the best offenses, he's getting all the red zone carries. All of them. Every single one of them. I'm buying David Montgomery right now.
Yeah. Completely agree there. The next buy that I'm going to have here is going to be Devonta Smith. And the biggest reason for this is going to be because of Dallas Goedert's injury. One of the kind of low-key under-the-radar discussions that we had, because we didn't talk about it much on YouTube in the offseason. I think we talked about it in our podcast once. Yeah. We basically said, which is it? Is Dallas Goedert's inability to produce consistently a product of Devonta Smith, or is Devonta Smith unable to produce consistently because of Dallas Goedert? Which one was it? Because when Goedert was in, he was producing pretty well, and Devonta Smith wasn't doing much, but it was kind of earlier in the season when their offense wasn't really clicking on all cylinders, and then towards the end of the season, you see Goedert go down, Devonta Smith goes off, and he's more consistent. Well, now we don't even have to worry about that discussion anymore because Dallas Goedert is potentially going to go on IR. He has a fractured forearm. This is now the second year in a row that Dallas Goedert has screwed you. Sucks for me, man.
Does suck.
Because he started playing really, 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 really well. Devonta Smith has already, from a production standpoint, been okay. But again, he's been very inconsistent. 9 points against the Jets, 8 points against Miami, 22 against Washington, and 14 against Dallas. And it took a touchdown off of 3 targets and him hauling in all 3 of those to score. That was a big red flag for me. But the second I heard that Dallas Goedert injured his forearm and is probably out for a significant amount of time, I am sprinting to go buy Devonta Smith. Sprinting. I think this is a situation where you have to look at the history, you have to look at the past. Devonta Smith, in the 21 games with Dallas Goedert, has averaged 14 points per game. In the 5 games without Dallas Goedert, he's averaged 2 more points per game, almost 16 points per game. That is significant.
It's pretty telling.
That is very telling. Those 2 points per game, like, that amounts to a lot, especially when you're talking about his boom weeks. I mean, that results in a ceiling, in my opinion, that is 5 to 10 points higher than it would be if it were with Dallas Goedert.
Easily.
Because of the amount of targets that Goedert was bringing in. So people say, oh, that's only 2 points per game. You have to apply that to individual games for the rest of the season, accounting for the games that'll probably be less than that and for the games that'll be more than that. That makes a greater ceiling for him. So I love it. I absolutely love it. The matchups for the next 5 games are going to be the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Niners, the Cowboys, and the Seahawks. My goodness. I mean, talk about a tough matchup. Top 5 tough matchups. But on top of that, you have very good defenses in the Cowboys, the Chiefs, and the Niners who are going to be all over A.J. Brown. Do I mean this thing? Do I mean this thinks?
Do I mean that this thinks?
Do I think that this means that A.J. Brown is not going to produce? No. A.J. Brown is on another level. He's incredible.
It's ridiculous.
He'll be fine. But this is just going to open the field up for Devonta Smith and increase his volume overall.
To me, the Goddard injury is the biggest argument.
Yeah.
I think I'm going with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with somebody that I've been tooting the horn up for a while now. It's going to be Drake London. Drake London, I want to look at one thing. And the quarterback change to me is the most important factor here. Terry McLaurin last year with Taylor Heinicke averaged 15.6 points per game. Without him, he averaged 12.3. We talk about a 2 point per game difference. Now we're talking about like 3.5 almost. That's significant. And to me, I've been looking at the Atlanta Falcons. I've been looking at Drake London's targets and the amount of passing attempts that they've had over the last couple weeks. They've been throwing the ball more, but in his last 3 games, 7 targets, 12 targets. He still has consistently gotten 7 or more targets pretty much since week 2. And when you're looking at the number of pass attempts in the last 4 weeks for the Falcons, 38, 34, 25, and 47. To me, this screams you're going to have a lot of people that are still low on Drake London, a lot of people that still think that situation's terrible, when in reality he's getting targets, and he's produced 10 points, 11 points, 21 points, and not had touchdowns. So if he gets a touchdown, again, you are talking about 18 to 20 points. That upside is there. The floor looks high. He's a half a touchdown under expected so far. But again, when you have all those factors, I think Drake London to me is a good buy right now in fantasy. I would look to add him on my contending and struggling teams in case you can get him fairly cheap, because I do think he's a fairly good value at price right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. Love Drake London, the talent. Love him in that offense. I think you saw last week's game being a little bit of a fluke too with Jonnu Smith's breakaway touchdown. Everyone's like, oh, again, outproducing Pitts. I mean, it came from that one 70-yard touchdown. So,
right, yeah.
I'm fine with Drake London. Love it. Deontay Johnson's going to be my next guy here. Deontay Johnson, man, put him in that group. Put him in that group of Godwin, Christian Kirk, heck, even Amari Cooper, who are just those big fantasy buys right now that have really high ceilings. And yeah, their situations aren't the most attractive, but what do? They command targets. They score points consistently. Deontay Johnson, when he plays, scores points, he gets the targets, and he completely ruins anyone that was dependent on George Pickens' production when he was out. Completely ruins everyone's hopes of George Pickens being a 1 and George Pickens being the next Dez Bryant. I've heard that a few times. Like George Pickens, he is. I know it's a rabbit trail. Oh yeah, I've heard that. Have you not heard that?
Holy cow!
I don't want to shout out the person who said it, but
Please do.
It was no. I literally I'll tell you later. Okay. It was someone who's very respected in the fantasy, just the football community, and it was bad. So. It's because of his contested catch ability.
Yeah, well, Dez Bryant also
gets
did
zero
some other
separation.
stuff.
Oh, I know.
In terms of well-roundedness, not even close.
Yep, I know.
Wow,
It
okay.
was,
Okay.
very, very, very bad.
Okay.
Deontay Johnson is absolutely the guy for the Pittsburgh Steelers since being healthy. He's got 6 targets, 14 against Jacksonville, and then 9 against Tennessee, putting up 12, 16, and 22 points respectively. He finally got a touchdown. Remember in 2022 when he had 0 touchdowns and everyone was so low on him because he got 0 touchdowns? He had to have been like 6 or 7 touchdowns under expected on the season.
He was.
It was unreal. Like I've never seen anything like that before. That was even more unpredictable than George Kittle's ridiculous touchdown rate last season.
Yeah.
This year, his target rate is 28%, 12th in the NFL. His target share, 24%, a 20% red zone rate as well. They're actually lower than they should be, and they include the game he got hurt, and they don't include the Thursday night game yet.
So those numbers are going to go up.
They're going to go up.
They might have already gone up. I'll check.
They're going to go up. Like that's ridiculous. Deontay Johnson. I'll keep saying his name, man. I mean, look at the targets that he's gotten compared to everyone else in that offense. In an offense that doesn't pass the ball very much, but he commands like everything there. 9 targets to A-Rob's 2, to Miles Boykin's 1, to Calvin Austin's 1, to George Pickens' 5. I mean, what else do you have to say here? What else do you have to say? Go buy Deontay Johnson.
Target share updated number is 19th. It's 25.5%. Number 12 in target rate.
Wow.
So it did go up. I'm going to go with T. Higgins here for my next guy. And I think T. Higgins, you could be like, yeah, you're a week late on this. Maybe. He's still the wide receiver 59 right now in fantasy. I think a lot of people will look at that and be like, yeah, T. Higgins isn't doing it for me. Yep. He had 9 targets, 8 receptions for 110 yards. That's obviously his ceiling. We know his ceiling. And obviously you get a touchdown on that, you got a 25-point ceiling. We know this. T. Higgins obviously has dealt with injury. His price was never good to start the season, but part of the reason that he has struggled is because he cracked his ribs. And I feel like that would affect a wide receiver playing football if you cracked your ribs. It's just a thought. But at the same time, T. Higgins in 2022 averaged 13.8 fantasy points per game. T. Higgins this year in 2023 is averaging 10.2 points per game. Significantly worse. The other part of this is that Joe Burrow and the Bengals typically start slow, and you saw that this year. But now Joe Burrow's 100%, and he looks like he's 100%. And the Bengals actually look decent. I don't know who's going to win the Super Bowl, by the way. I have no clue. It seems wide open to me this year. I'm kind of excited.
Yeah,
which means the Chiefs are going to win. But
yes,
again,
their defense is so good,
I know.
bro.
Again, a fairly decent secondary in Buffalo. Obviously, they have some injuries. But when you're looking at what T. Higgins was able to do, and you're looking at Joe Burrow now, I'm getting more comfortable starting and buying T. Higgins. I think if you could still get him for wide receiver 3 prices, you do. Yeah. He's probably a low-end mid to mid wide receiver 2. That's what T. Higgins is.
Yep.
That's always what he has been.
He gets some good targets, though.
He gets some good targets, though. So I'm going to buy T. Higgins. That's my pick.
Yep. I'm going to buy Puka Nacua. I'm going to go with Puka Nacua here. And a lot of this is not going to be because of him specifically as a talent or a player. And, I mean, regardless, let's just talk about him as a talent. He already has 9 weeks into the season, 800 receiving yards. Yeah, he's a 5th-round rookie. That's
significant.
Yeah, everyone was all over Garrett Wilson last year when he had 1,100 yards on the season. Maybe Puka Nacua slows down a little bit because of the Stafford injury. But what I care about most here is that Kyren Williams was just announced to be ready to go, ready to come back. They're expecting him to be back by week 12 after the bye. Or week 12, maybe even week 11 after the bye.
I think I saw week 12 too, yeah.
With that being the case, and with the assumption that Matt Stafford is going to play after the bye as well, Kyren Williams is such an important piece in that offense to open up the field for the receivers and for Matt Stafford. Takes a lot of pressure off of him, where he can step back in the pocket, be a lot more comfortable, and just get the ball to his playmakers and Puka and Cooper Kupp, honestly. I mean, Cooper Kupp has not been as consistent as Puka Nacua has been.
That is true.
He hasn't.
He's
so
consistently
ultimately,
getting 6 points.
Yeah. Which wide receiver do you want to take there? I'm taking Puka. I'm taking Puka.
It's bold.
And I know it's bold, but regardless, I think this is something that's going to be really overlooked, and Puka could be a really sneaky buy. I mean, a guy who has shown what his ceiling is with Cooper Kupp coming back, healthy in week 5. he still had games of like 20 and 23 points. So I think you're looking at that and you're like, okay, well, he's proven that he can do that. And once Kyron Williams went down, that really hurt everyone in that offense because they had no one to give the ball to. Henderson can only do so much. So I like the situation. I think it's sneaky, but I'm comfortable with it.
The last guy here is going to be Alexander Madison. And this is going to be largely because Cam Akers is out for the season with a torn Achilles, meaning Alexander Madison, who has averaged, listen to his efficiency, 2.75 yards per carry, 1.94 yards per carry, 4.8, better, only on 8 carries, and 2.44 yards per carry.
That is disgusting.
I want to pull up. I mean, I don't know.
I still think he's a buy.
You do still think he's a buy?
I do still think he's a buy.
Okay.
I really like the running backs in an offense led by Josh Dobbs. I just do. I mean, if Madison had any receiving upside, which he's demonstrated in some games against Chicago, yeah, it's been inconsistent. But, I mean, even he had a big play off of 2 targets and 2 receptions in the Atlanta game, and he got a touchdown out of one of them, 49 yards off of 2 receptions, which is nice. And he's going to continue to get this volume, 16 carries, 16, 8, 18. Yeah, he was starting to split time there with Cam Akers, but now that Akers is out, like, I'm honestly kind of excited about Madison for the rest of the year from a fantasy perspective. I mean, this is a situation that I see very similar to Rachaad White. The reason we were so low on Madison going into the year was they drafted Jordan Addison. They had Justin Jefferson. They had just paid TJ Hawkinson to a massive extension, and they had Kirk Cousins, who throws the ball literally with the best of them in the NFL from a volume perspective. What did you think they were going to do? Run the ball for half the game? No, they were going to pass it like 70% of the time.
Right.
And that's what held true. And that's what happened. We're in a completely different situation now. I mean, I see this really being a situation that's very similar to average to below average quarterback teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think that'll really help Madison and help him get his opportunity up for the second half of the year. So I think he'll be fine. Do I think he's got a massive ceiling and just going to blow the socks off of everyone and just score a ridiculous amount of points? No, but I do think he'll be more consistent, and I do think he'll offer more receiving upside.
Some fun facts on Alexander Madison. He is 46th in the league in true yards per carry.
Right. He's
46th.
He's so bad that he's not expensive.
But he is first in the league in drops. Sorry.
Nice.
All right. Make sure you drop a like on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you go get these players to add to your fantasy team. Appreciate you guys watching so much. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you later.